Europeans still can't recover from the shock after learning that their main ally, the President of the United States of America, is offering Ukraine and Europe a peace plan that was written together with the Russians, behind the backs of Ukrainians and Europeans. But what scares Europeans even more is that Trump even allowed the possibility of using frozen Russian assets in Europe, even though they have no right to them. And now, many European media outlets are full of headlines saying that Europeans and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte have made considerable efforts to convince the new United States presidential administration not to abandon its commitments to NATO partners. But the peace plan for Ukraine has shown that under Donald Trump, the United States can easily disregard the interests of its allies. Friedrich Merz was eventually forced to publicly state there was no peace partner. But there needs to be coordination with Europe, because this specifically concerns European security. So why the hell is Trump even negotiating about this with the Russians without the Europeans involved? But that's not all. It turned out that in that very peace plan of 28 points, there was a provision stating that the United States was ready to act as a mediator in the dialogue between NATO and Russia. This is just mind-boggling. The absolute main member of the North Atlantic Alliance says, listen, we'll step aside a little and if needed, we'll act as mediators between you and your dialogue. So, does this mean that the United States is downplaying its own role? My name is Alexei Pechi, let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write any comment under this episode. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. So right now Europe is shocked by the peace plan that Trump proposed to Ukraine because it showed that Trump is ready to disregard the interests of NATO allies for the benefit of America. Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner developed the initial peace plan after Trump instructed his national security team to prepare a proposal similar to the plan for resolving the conflict in the Gaza Strip. And accordingly, he says, let's do the same thing. The Wall Street Journal reports this based on conversations with United States officials and people familiar with the situation. But for some reason, Witkoff and Kushner turned to the Russian official Kirill Dmitriev to develop this peace plan, and he was the one who drafted it. They invited him to Witkoff's where they spent days writing. The resulting document, which became known a week ago, caused shock in Europe because it completely ignored European interests and limited both their own and Ukraine's security. The consequences of this peace plan would go far beyond Ukraine and could haunt us for a long time, a senior European diplomat told the Financial Times. And so, according to European officials and analysts, Washington's approach could undermine NATO's authority, as it prohibited Ukraine from joining NATO, forced changes to membership rules, and ultimately called into question the United States' commitment to the alliance's policy. And here I will give you a very telling, short but illustrative quote from the Vice President of the German Marshall Fund, Claudia Meitzor. Quote, Russia is changing NATO policy, do you understand? Just imagine that. Even Stalin couldn't achieve this, but Vladimir Putin and his special representative Kirill Dmitriev managed at least to push the Donald Trump administration in this direction. Just imagine that again. That is, NATO, which was created to defend against this aggressive Russia, essentially allows that very Russia to come in and dictate the rules for how NATO should exist. So this cuddly Putin comes in and says, all right, make it official that you are not Russia, expand, and that Ukraine will never join your ranks, and you have to make this a law. And the main player in this alliance is the United States of America. They say, yes, let's do it that way. Well, Putin is asking, our main opponent is demanding this from us, so let's go ahead and do it. And, as the Wall Street Journal writes, at the end of October, Witkoff and Kushner, whom Dmitriev has known for a long time, brought Putin's envoy to Witkoff's home in Miami. For 30 days, he helped create a list of conditions to end the military actions. So, the Russian Dmitriev was at Witkoff's house, and there the three of them were writing this plan together. It was Dmitriev, according to the Wall Street Journal's source, who insisted on banning Ukraine from joining NATO and on its complete withdrawal from Donbass. including from territories not captured by Russia, as well as on a significant reduction in the size of the armed forces of Ukraine. Dmitriev also proposed points about resuming Russian-American economic cooperation. Well, it's really hard to even imagine that. But while Europe is spending its money to buy weapons from the United States for Ukraine, Europe itself is facing sabotage and raids by Russian drones on its own territory. Representatives of the Trump administration bring an unwashed Russian to their home, and he writes a peace plan for Ukraine and Europe behind the backs of Ukraine and Europe, and the White House even declares that they don't care about Europe's position. Moreover, as the Wall Street Journal writes, when Witkoff and Kushner were invited, Witkoff and Kushner talked about him since November 16. The Ukrainian president, who thanked them and Trump for their efforts to achieve peace, promised to consider the proposal and call back. So this confirms what I told you earlier in previous episodes. Rustem Umerov was in Miami on November 16 specifically to discuss the peace plan with Steve Witkoff. But Bloomberg adds that the text of the plan was given to United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio only on November 18, and that same evening, Axios reported about it publicly. Trump learned about the plan at the last minute, but approved it after a brief summary. Sources say Trump didn't review the peace plan closely, trusting Witkoff and Kushner when they said it was good and worth promoting. In my view, they're just trying to shift some responsibility away from Donald Trump right now. He didn't know that this was a completely Russian peace plan. I think he knew about it perfectly well. That's why they're saying he just approved it and didn't really get involved. But the most striking thing about Donald Trump's peace plan is how he presented the United States in relation to Russia. Just listen to this. The Europeans were completely shocked by it. One of the points of this plan provided for, I quote, the United States would act as an independent arbiter, not as the leading force of the alliance and the main bulwark against Russian aggression. Sorry, but this shows us that Trump and his circle really believe that the United States of America is not part of NATO, that they are somehow separate. And once again, the plan stated that the United States, which has always been the leader of the North Atlantic Alliance, now acts simply as a mediator between Russia and NATO. And if there is any aggression from Russia against NATO, the United States won't get involved, because who are they? They're just mediators. Another point mentioned the creation of a joint American-Russian working group to ensure compliance with all the provisions of this agreement. This, as you know, excluded both Ukraine and the Europeans from the process. And most importantly, there is no longer any confidence in where the United States is heading at all. It's not just that this is a complete mess, it simply undermines trust in what we can expect from the Americans at all. Well, listen, if they're ready to sit down and talk with NATO's main adversary and even act as mediators, between the alliance they lead and the unwashed Russians, then I don't even know how to describe this. And here's an interesting quote. Behind such conversations lies a sad truth, notes foreign policy columnist Emma Ashford. Yes, Trump's attempts to organize a peace process between Ukraine and Russia seem chaotic, but almost everyone has already given up hope for anything better than the current terrible status quo. The new White House plan may not come to life, but the alternative to a peace process is even worse. After Secretary of State Marco Rubio took control of the peace plan negotiations, serious points were excluded from it, including limiting the size of the Ukrainian armed forces, banning the deployment of foreign troops in Ukraine, and Ukraine's accession to NATO. And the issue of relations between Russia and the alliance will be discussed separately. But another blow to relations between Europe and the United States has already been dealt. Europeans now have experience. We can't rely on America, and this is a new phenomenon since the end of World War II. Now we live in a new world, so I'll put an ellipsis here. Share your opinion and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.